and I was apoplectic. I thought, oh, here's all these years, the vow I made back in 1966, everything was going down the drain.
But there's this very small, but very loud and vocal, very nasty segment of fandom, which I personally, I can't stand.
That comic books are an important contributing factor in many cases of juvenile delinquency.
In the beginning, there was an explosion that filled an impossible void. And then there were planets that defined something from the nothingness. Then came life. First minute, then large and cumbersome, and then man. And man had to learn to survive, to make fire, to find purpose in existence itself. And once all that was sorted out, man learned to get annoyed about stuff. So this is a podcast about some controversies. Not the big political controversies, not corporate espionage or fraud. No, none of that. Controversies you may not even have known happened, or how weird they were. So join Andy Smith on a 5-part miniseries delving into little controversies in different aspects of our media. In this episode, we look at a tall, muscular, hirsute comic book hero jumping from the page to the big screen, portrayed by a not-so-tall, not-so-muscular, and not-so-hirsute actor. We all know the story by now. A young boy sees his parents gunned down before him and makes a vow to stop criminals at all costs. Interrupted from his fretful musings on his crime-fighting plans by the sudden appearance of a bat, a legend is born. The Batman. The is optional. Batman was created in 1939 by Bob Kane and Bill Finger. And in his very early days, Batman, pulp as pulp could be, would shoot evildoers in cold blood. Bill Finger, the co-creator of Batman, certainly did not shy away from admitting he took the Shadow as a massive inspiration, and so, like the Shadow, Batman packed heat and was happy to use it.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows.
But sometime in the 1940s, the decision was made to ditch the heat and allow Batman to rely on his fists and his brain. The character only gained more popularity as he became less the pulp noir vigilante in a mask and developed into the superhero we know him as today. A genius detective who, no matter how ruthless he can be, has a strict moral code at his core. And the gritty darkness of the Dark Knight rolled on. Until it didn't.
It is my opinion, without any reasonable doubt and without any reservation, that comic books are an important contributing factor in many cases of juvenile delinquency.
Psychiatrist Frederick Wortham felt the comic books were poison for vulnerable, impressionable young minds, and things got a lot more real really, really quickly. Batman was one of Wortham's targets. Fearing that the relationship between Batman and Robin promoted homosexuality, he wrote this in his landmark 1954 book, The Seduction of the Innocent.
The Batman type of story helps to fixate homoerotic tendencies by suggesting the form of adolescent with adult or Ganymede Zeus type of love relationship. It is like the wish dream of two homosexuals living together.
Batman, after so much shooting and punching people in the face, had found controversy. And it wasn't just Batman. A whole colourful gang of comic characters were targeted too, such as Superman.
Undermines the authority and dignity of the ordinary man and woman in the minds of children, a symbol of violent race superiority.
Wonder Woman.
The homosexual connotations of the Wonder Woman type of story are unmistakable.
Blue Beetle.
A child, stimulated to fantasies about violent and sadistic adventures, and about a man who changes into an insect, gets frightened. Kafka for the kiddies.
And crime comics as a whole.
Crime comics are an agent with harmful potentialities. They bring about a mass conditioning of children.
And, well, just comics generally, as outlined in these 8 handy key points.
1. The comic book format is an invitation to illiteracy. 2. Crime comic books create an atmosphere of cruelty and deceit. 3. They create a readiness for temptation. 4. They stimulate unwholesome fantasies. 5. They suggest criminal or sexually abnormal ideas. 6. They furnish the rationalization for them, which may be ethically even more harmful than the impulse. 7. They suggest the forms a delinquent impulse may take and supply details of technique. 8. They may tip the scales towards maladjustment or delinquency.
So things were looking tough for comics, and for Batman. But fear not, they just started making Batman a bit nicer. He smiled and stuff. In the late 50s, he started to visit space and do more sci-fi things with aliens and just generally be a bit more fun and less grim. Naturally, that was a terrible idea, and sales slumped and slumped. So, best make a radical change. Or just make it worse. It's worth pointing out just how divisive the 1960s Adam West Batman show really was. To many, it was dynamite. But to many others, it was heresy, and remains so today. To be fair, the TV show was very successful for a while, but as it started to fizzle out, ratings plummeted and the show got cancelled, it took the whole Batworld with it. So, best make a radical change. Again. And this time they did, with the comic books returning Batman to his darker roots. Basically, he stopped smiling. And things were looking good. Batman was being taken seriously again. No, maybe he was not the phenomenon he had been, if only for a short while, but the character felt relevant again. But the camp taste of the 60s TV show would dog him forevermore, especially in the 70s and 80s. It was like a smell he just couldn't wash off. No matter how much he grimaced, people just couldn't forget him smiling. But there was a true fan out there, a disciple of the real Batman, the old school Batman, and he wasn't standing for it anymore.
It was, at that point in time, 7.5 years since I started my quest to bring a dark and serious Batman to the silver screen. So Ben Melniker and I acquired rights to Batman on October 3rd, 1979. And set out to make these revolutionary, dark and serious comic book superhero movies, something that had never been done before.
Michael Uslan, a prolific film producer whose name is on every Batman film since 1989, and quite a few more as well. Here's the list. Swamp Thing, American Playhouse, Dinosaurs, The Return of Swamp Thing, Batman, Swamp Thing TV series, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, The Fish Police, Batman Returns, Swamp Thing TV series, Harmful Intent, Batman Mask of the Phantasm, Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero, Batman Beyond the Return of the Joker, Chase Me, Batman Mystery of the Batwoman, Catwoman, Marvel Superheroes Guide to New York City, National Treasure, Constantine, Batman Begins, The Batman vs. Dracula, The Legend Behind the Comic Books, Two Rocks on a Stone, Batman Gotham Knight, The Dark Knight, The Spirit, Superman Batman Enemies, Superman vs. Aliens, Dark Knight Rises, Batman Dark Knight Returns Part 1, Batman Dark Knight Part 2, The Lego Batman movie, The Lego movie, Son of Batman, Justice League Gods and Monsters, Batman Limited Monsters Mayhem, Lego DC Superheroes, Justice League, Zack Legend, Batman Batman, Lego DC Superheroes, Justice League, Batman vs. Superman, Batman Killing Joke, Batman Limited Max vs. Mutants, Lego Batman movie, Batman Harley Quinn, Batman vs. Two-Face, Justice League, Scooby-Doo, Batman, Batman Comic Lego DC Comics Superheroes. Batman Ninja, Teen Titans Go to the Movies, and the upcoming The Luckiest Man on the Face of the Earth, the upcoming Doc Savage, and the upcoming Constantine 2. He's a busy man, but he made time to speak to me on the phone about his decision to buy the rights to make Batman movies. Uslan was determined to make a dark, gritty, serious Batman movie and show the world what the character truly was. He negotiated a deal with DC Comics to purchase the rights, and after sourcing funding, closed the deal and set out into the world to make his Batman movie. Except the world didn't want him to make his Batman movie.
And much to my chagrin, when we went out, we were turned down point blank by every studio in Hollywood and every, what they called back then, mini-major. And I was repeatedly told I was crazy, they said, Michael, you're nuts. You can't do serious comic book movies. You can't do dark superheroes. You can't make a movie out of an old television series. Nobody's ever done that. So the struggles that went on for such a crazy long period of time, the ultimate Hollywood siege, I would call it.
Producers John Peters and Peter Guber decided a new script was needed and called in Tom Mankiewicz, a well-established comic-to-film writer who had previously scripted the first two Superman movies.
He will call himself Clark Kent. But the world will know him as Superman.
But Warner Brothers were not happy with the script. Where was the likeness and humour of the Superman films? Well, this wasn't Supes. It was Bats, a very different, much darker figure. The script was ditched, and they still needed to find a director. Enter Tim Burton, a man with a visual flair.
And I'll never forget getting the call from my friends at Warner, and they said, listen, we've got this guy. He's out of Disney Animation. We got to show you the fine cut of this movie he just did for us called Pee-wee's Big Adventure and see what you think. So I went in, saw it, and I came out and I said, this kid's amazing. I've never seen such a creative combination of direction and art direction in my life.
Burton was a strong choice to bring a visual flair to the film, but he was not exactly in love with the source material, at least not at first.
He was not really a comic book fan. He was not a Batman fan. And I had to indoctrinate him into that world. So I took comics and things from my personal collection. And my primary job initially was really to keep him far away from all the silly, campy Batman stuff and only let him see the comics that I felt really, really successfully portrayed the creature of the night who was stalking disturbed villains from the shadows. By the end, Andy, of the 3 lunches, I was absolutely convinced this was the guy. He had a vision for how to make the world's first ever dark and serious comic book superhero movie, and I believed he could execute that vision. And that's really what got the ball rolling.
Warner Brothers, still reluctant all this time and wary of sinking so much cash into such a risky, divisive and demanding project, just weren't ready to take the risk.
Holy scaredy cat!
And Burton went off to make Beetlejuice. Meanwhile, respected Batman writer Steve Engelbert was pulled in for a new treatment. Basically an outline of a film's story, character and tones. And then Sam Hamm, also a comics writer, was enlisted to write the film's screenplay. Warner Brothers were finally feeling more confident, buoyed by the new script and the critical reception of Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns miniseries comic, an uber-dark reimagining of an older, meaner, jaded Batman. The 4-issue miniseries had been a hit for DC Comics and had set a new benchmark for a gritty Gotham City and its inhabitants. That, coupled with the success of Burton's recently released Beetlejuice, gave the studio the nudge, and they finally greenlit the Batman movie. Pre-production began. But they needed a star to get the wheels turning, and only one man could do it.
You know, I had been campaigning since Memorial Day of 1980 to have Jack Nicholson play the Joker. I believed he was really the only actor capable. I was getting on a bus in New York City, got the afternoon paper, back then it was the New York Post. I opened it up to the movie section, and there, for the first time ever, I saw what has become a very iconic picture of Jack Nicholson. It's what they call the "Here's Johnny" shot. I said, oh my God, this is the Joker. So I tore out from the newspaper that picture, and when I got home, I went to my desk, and I took white out, and I whited out Jack's face, and I took a red magic marker, and I did his lips. I took a green magic marker and did his hair, and I showed Tim and everyone associated with the movie, ultimately, you know, why Nicholson is the only one who could play the Joker. And in fact, I saved everything. So I saved that, and I actually reprinted in my autobiography, which was published a few years ago by Chronicle Books, called The Boy Who Loved Batman. And you can actually see that model for what was to come. So when Nicholson was finally hired, it was like the greatest day of my career.
All was well. But they still needed a Batman. Ray Liotta and Pierce Brosnan were both approached, but turned the opportunity down. But Burton had a guy he knew, who he had worked with before. It needed to be an actor of imposing stature, of cold, dark looks, and a chiseled chin. Or not.
I get a call from my friend who was Warner Brothers executive at the time, and he said, so Michael, what do you think of Tim's idea to hire Michael Keaton? And I said, I could see that poster now in Times Square, Mr. Mom is Batman, and I laughed. And it took him a good solid 20 minutes to convince me this was not a joke on me, but that this was serious, and this was something Tim was really contemplating. And I was apoplectic. I thought, oh, here's all these years, you know, the vow I made back in 1966 to one day show the world what the dark and serious Batman, the one created in 1939, was really like the true Batman. Everything was going down the drain. I said, Tim, first of all, he's a comedian. He's not a serious actor. And Tim said, no, he is. So Warner set up a screening of the rough cut of a movie called Clean and Sober for me to see.
Yeah.
So I came out of that. I said, okay, I take it all back. The guy is a fabulous, serious actor. But Tim, he's my height. He's got a receding hairline. He doesn't have the muscles. And for God's sake, he does not have the square jaw that defines Batman. And Tim said, Michael, when we're going from one medium to another, a square jaw does not a Batman make. He said, I can cheat height. I can carve musculature into a costume. I can fix a receding hairline. This movie is not about Batman. So I'm standing there and my jaw's dropping. I go, what do you mean? He says, it is not about Batman. In order to be a serious movie, this has got to be all about Bruce Wayne. That's the whole key. He said, we've got to create a portrayal of a Bruce Wayne who's so driven, so obsessed, to the point of being psychotic, that audiences will go, oh yeah, get dressed up as a bat and go out and fight crime. He said, all right, I'm telling you right now as a director, I do not know how to get one of our quote-unquote serious actors today, which back then would have been people like Kevin Costner, Harrison Ford, Dennis Quaid. I don't know how to show any of them getting into a bat suit without getting unintentional laughs from the audience. Don't know how to do it. But I'm telling you, I've worked with Michael Keaton now, and he can do this, and audiences will buy it.
So Keaton was cast and pre-production began. So the fans, the true fans of the dark, dark Batman who did not smile, had a real treat coming and were surely all chuffed to bits. So this is sure to go well. Or not. Don't forget, they had not had the benefit of lunches with Tim Burton to settle them down.
Michael Keaton, because up until that time, really...
Bill Ramey is the founder and editor-in-chief of BatmanOnFilm.com. Since 1998, he's been running the site and banging the drum for quality Batman films. You might call him a professional Bat fan.
They're finally going to make a live-action Batman movie, and it's going to be a send-off, a homage or whatever, a remake of the 60s Adam West TV show. And I never was like, I'm going to boycott this movie. I didn't write a letter to Warner Brothers, but I just couldn't fathom Michael Keaton playing Batman, you know.
Ah, yes, the letters. In the age of social media and hashtags, outrages seem to be coming thick and fast. And every time a comic book character is cast, sees a meltdown online.
Heath Ledger has the charisma of a lettuce leaf.
This movie.
An awful choice.
Total miss.
Looks like she'd snap in half if I leaned on her.
Every level.
There is no logical reasoning why anyone would think evidence is good for the part.
Total miscast.
What a horrible choice.
Defecated on the history of Batman. Wrong on every level.
Treating Batman as a comedy is like the Brady Bunch going porno.
And so on. But this is 1988 we're talking about. People were wearing entire outfits made of denim. Surely they had bigger things to worry about, for God's sake. Apparently not.
Of course, and this is the day, this is before Twitter, this is before social media, before Facebook. And so, you know, you couldn't feel or hear the outcry, but then by later, the mid of 88, going into 89, Entertainment Tonight and various news outlets started reporting that Warner Brothers and DC had been sent thousands and thousands of letters in protest over Keaton's casting. And I can only imagine how that would go down today. You know, you would hear it on TV, you would read about it, how fans on their own just wrote these letters. And I'm sure that, you know, they talk with each other, but it was just a different day where you couldn't pick up a cell phone and talk with someone or tweet or any of that. It was mostly people doing it individually, you know.
Yes, there really were around 50,000 letters sent to Warner Brothers Pictures to vent annoyance at Michael Keaton's casting. 50,000. 50,000 people actually bothered to pick up pen or crayon and write to Warner Brothers. That's a lot of letters. And perhaps even worse, the general media had caught on to the outrage too and realised there were column inches to be exploited.
Holy headlines.
And so the Keaton rot started to creep into mainstream consciousness. Poison for a summer blockbuster film. And the cameras hadn't even started rolling yet.
Letter to the Los Angeles Times, printed July 3rd, 1988, by Alan B. Rothstein. The Sam Hamm script that director Tim Burton is filming has many blunders, but does treat the characters basically seriously. Obviously, in casting Keaton, Burton is rejecting this approach altogether and going after a manic comedy. Batman has been a popular character for almost 5 decades, not because he's a figure of comedy, but precisely because he is not, especially in the last couple of years. By ignoring this, by casting a clown as Batman, Warner Brothers and Burton have defecated on the history of Batman and on the hopes of those who appreciate the character and his potential. Better, they should have filmed Frank Miller's Batman The Dark Knight Returns, but that would have required courage, taste, and imagination.
The Dark Knight Returns again. Frank Miller's brutal Gotham was the Gotham so many of the vocal hardcore wanted, and was a million miles away from what they feared they were going to get.
Chris McCubbin, managing editor of Amazing Heroes, issue 151. I don't like Keaton as the Batman. It has nothing to do with his comedy roles. I consider that a plus. What worries me is his looks.
So with all this, and those 50,000 letters direct to their door, Warner Brothers knew action needed taking, and quick. But at least the creators knew what they were doing, and had faith in their vision, and the backing of a few key Bat personnel. Or maybe not. Bob Kane, who was long considered the one and true creator of Batman, until Bill Finger was finally officially recognised as co-creator in 2015, had also gone on record as not being too happy with Keaton portraying the Dark Knight detective. And even once he was backtracking later, confessed to Pat H. Brewster in the LA Times,
"When I heard about Michael Keaton, I admit, I kind of panicked."
Warner Brothers needed Kane on side as a way to reach out to the fans as the father of their beloved character. And so that's exactly what they did, by way of making him a consultant on the movie. It's impossible to say if this move was entirely a reaction to the wave of criticism, or if Kane's inside eye was truly utilised. But now on board, Kane went to the San Diego Comic-Con to make the case for Keaton, and as he relayed to Pat H. Brewster in her interview, he said he was there
as a kind of cheerleader. Fans have got to give the guy a chance.
But perhaps he didn't cheer loudly enough. As Glenn Weldon related in his book, The Caped Crusade, Batman and the Rise of Nerd Culture, at the San Diego Comic-Con, fans were not convinced, even by Batman's dad. Quoting Comic Buyer's Guide co-editor Don Thompson,
"Most people are dismissing Bob Kane, saying Warner is paying him to say nice things about the movie. No one seems to be taking him seriously."
Letter to Premiere Magazine.
Michael Keaton is in no way suited to play the role of the Dark Knight. His personality, screen image and physical makeup are about the absolute opposite of the time-honoured character of Bruce Wayne, regardless of what Bob Kane may think. Holy sellout.
Yeah, that didn't really do the trick. Sorry, Bob. Even the film industry was piping up now, with legend telling that a severely major Hollywood player called the Warner's chairman to advise that Batman would sink the studio.
Holy bad news!
But come on, a big summer movie is a big summer movie, right? If it's a decent film, it'll get decent reviews, and if it's well marketed, it will sell tickets. So who cares what a few fans have to say? After all, the hardcore fans don't fill the theatres, the general public do. The ones who just want a good time. Right? Well, perhaps not. As Sue Martin and Pat H. Brewster pointed out in their LA Times article on September the 11th, 1988,
in case you were wondering if die-hard fans matter in terms of ticket sales, fact is, it's die-hard fans who can help turn an otherwise obscure movie into a cult title.
But the show must go on. Money had been invested after all. And after all this fuss and hand-wrangling and hair-pulling and teeth-gnashing, Warner Brothers would have looked pretty foolish putting the brakes on. Filming began in 1988 in Pinewood Studios, England, and was a massive undertaking for all concerned, as Joe Morgenstern pointed out in a later article, published in 1989 in the New York Times.
When Tim Burton reported to Pinewood Studios near London last October to direct Hollywood's big-budget version of Batman, he was 29 years old and an absolute bafflement to the British crew. There they were, more than 300 strong, about to start shooting a $30 million spectacular with a top-notch cast headed by Jack Nicholson, Michael Keaton and Kim Basinger, with elaborate sets covering 9 sound stages and most of the 95-acre backlot, and with a script that called for action sequences of daunting complexity. And there Tim was, with his wild black hair, his vagrant's wardrobe and his California space cadet's demeanour. Though the Brits knew he'd already directed 2 features, Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Beetlejuice, they also knew he'd never done an action picture in his life. Talk about innocence abroad. Batman's leader hadn't even brought a proper winter coat. It's easy to take Tim Burton for an innocent. This movie's so monumental, he marvelled to a visitor, sounding much like a visitor himself.
Production was stressful from the off, with producer John Peters unhappy with Sam Hamm's script, resulting in it being hastily rewritten to alter the ending so Bruce Wayne's girlfriend Vicky Vale didn't die, the Joker was the gunman who killed Wayne's parents and set him on the path to becoming Batman, and cut Robin out of the film altogether.
Holy sudden incapacitation!
Yes, Robin was supposed to be in the film. He was cast and everything. Ricky Ellison Reed got the role.
Holy reincarnation!
Before it was snatched away from him again.
Holy heart failure!
And still not everyone was sold on Keaton, though they would soon start to see that no matter how much Burton may have seemed out of his depth on a film set of this scale, the vision locked away in his head was starting to come to fruition.
Even when we were on the set, in Pinewood Studios in London. And, 5 square city blocks of Gotham City was built on the back lot of Pinewood. And I'll never forget this first day that we were on the set. There must have been 300 people around, and Michael was in his costume. He didn't have his cowl and cape on, but you couldn't even pick him out of a crowd. He was wearing a costume. I go, oh, no. But as soon as we saw the first dailies, it was very, very clear that not only did Tim know what he was doing, but that his vision was right and he did know how to execute it.
Filming would continue for 4 months, but be halted somewhere in the middle for yet another rewrite. This time to improve the finale where the Joker and Batman fight it out in a cathedral. This, along with the fact the film was now badly over budget at $48 million, more than 50% over its original budget, meant a lot of people were starting to feel awfully grumpy about the whole thing. But they were halfway done. It was the end of November. Just a few more weeks to finish filming and then they could go their separate ways and the film could go into post-production. And a Christmas break was on the way too, so things weren't so bad, were they? Well, as if things weren't tough enough for the film already, the venerable Wall Street Journal pitched in too, with a front page story. It was titled, Batman Fans Fear the Jokes on Them in Hollywood Epic. Excerpted here.
November 29, 1988 by Kathleen A. Hughes. Batman's sidekick Robin is officially dead. But for followers of the dynamic duo everywhere, the worst is yet to come. The Caped Crusader may turn out to be a wimp. Hundreds of passionate and humorless protest letters.
Okay, so this may seem like more of the same. We've heard it all before. Surely by now this stuff would be water off the bat's back. But this is the Wall Street Journal. It was kind of a big deal.
Fans have circulated petitions demanding a different cast.
And so yet more damage control was required. A trailer was quickly assembled from the available footage to show just what tone Burton and co were aiming for. It's a dark trailer for a dark film. Literally, there's not one well-lit scene in it. And people finally started to take the film and Michael Keaton seriously. Here was the proof that Tim Burton knew what he was doing. But bear in mind, this is 1988 we're talking about.
There's not really an internet. There's not really that connectivity. There are not comic book conventions all over America and all over the world. By 1989, there's San Diego, there's New York, and you could probably count on 2 fingers the rest of conventions around the world. So I think the first big step that brought everybody into line was when the first trailer went out. There was a cultural phenomenon happening at that time where the studio were getting all these reports in from theaters, from theater circuits, and apparently people were calling up theaters to find out at what theater, for what movie, the Batman trailer was appearing. And they would go to the movie theater, they would pay for the movie, they would watch the trailer for 2 minutes, and then they would leave. And I think it was that first trailer that turned the tide.
I think that won a lot of people over. And they put that together, it's kind of a sizzle reel. It's really just just a montage of scenes they put together. And that was when everything started to change. I remember the first time I saw Keaton in the suit, it was looking through either Starlog or Comic Scene, and they had that picture of him next to the Batmobile. It's a publicity shot. And I thought, okay, this may work. And then you see that trailer, I'm Batman and all that.
I'm Batman.
And that's when, for me personally, I was like, okay, I'm on board with this. So I think most fans felt the same way once they saw that trailer and saw those first publicity shots.
It was not a game changer completely, but all of a sudden they said, oh my God, this actually looks serious. So it changed the temperament. And then they were willing to give it a shot and go actually see it before they judged it. And then following that, everybody said they don't want anyone else ever to play Batman.
Batman the movie was finally released on June 23rd, 1989 and smashed the box office. Absolutely pulverized it. In its theatrical run, it earned over $400 million. That's a hell of a return on its $48 million budget. And Batman was big news again. Huge news. The fever that swept pop culture was named Batmania and was all-pervasive. The Bat logo was everywhere, and merchandisers had a field day. And after all this, Michael Keaton could stand proud knowing that he had truly earned the right to say,
I'm Batman.
comic book movie, any genre movie, and you can still see in every one the influence of Tim Burton's vision, the influence of Anton Furst's design work, the influence of Danny Elfman's musical notes. You really can. And it was revolutionary. So it changed Hollywood, it changed the comic book industry, and it didn't just impact the box office. It had a global cultural impact. This movie was transcending not only borders, but it was transcending cultures.
So the film was a massive success and everyone was happy.
Holy jackpot!
But more importantly, everyone learned something. Not to jump to judgments, perhaps. That a creative vision can trump all. That it's just a film, so, chill out. And the world was a better place forevermore. Or not. It all happened again when Heath Ledger was cast as the Joker in 2008's The Dark Knight.
There was a huge contingency of fans that were up in arms. I thought they were going to surround Warner Brothers with pitchforks and torches. Oh my God, they said, a gay cowboy to play the Joker, they're going to destroy this character. Until they saw it. And of course, the same thing happened, and most fans said we never want anyone else to ever play the Joker.
And then it happened again in 2013 when Ben Affleck was cast as Batman.
And I got a call from somebody in PR at Warner Brothers. They said, Michael, we need you to go online. We need you to talk to the fans really fast. It was like 70% of everything on the internet for 48 hours was about this. And I basically went on the internet, and then I spoke at conventions, and I said, I've been through this with Michael Keaton. We all have. I've been through this with Heath Ledger. We all have. You got to do the same thing here. You got to wait. You got to see it first and then judge. That's all I'm asking. And it happened twice before, and you got to do it again.
These fans have this idea in their mind how this movie is going to be, and it's based on what they want. And when it doesn't happen, then there's it's just, controversy, they vitriol, and they explode and they protest because it goes against their narrative in their own mind. And it's the same as casting. When someone's cast and it doesn't fit what they imagine the actor should be who plays the role or what it should look like, they get all upset.
It's awful that we fans, who take so much joy from these things, use that energy negatively. I have to be truly honest. I get pissed off sometimes with this stuff too. I can't help myself. I look back on what the film Batman vs. Superman could have been. But come on, what I really mean is the film I wanted it to be. And at the end of the day, writing letters and so on was just what people did before Facebook and Twitter. The fans back then are as the fans now. Almost.
But there's this very small but very loud and vocal, very nasty segment of fandom, which I personally, I can't stand. Just the vitriol, the nastiness online, that's new, relatively new. You wouldn't have that. I don't think you would seen that in the letters that people wrote Warner Brothers back then. That may be a handful. It's so much different because people are so empowered by being anonymous on the internet and can say anything they want to say and wouldn't say, to anybody in person. That's the difference between now and then, obviously.
It has to be said that this instant access to releasing one's opinions and fury isn't always a good thing. But that is the minority. Most fans, however vocal, are still legitimate fans. They just have strong opinions. Sometimes very, very strong opinions. But it all feels like such a waste of energy, and it must be exhausting, scary, worrying, and just horrible for those in the targets.
But that's what happens. And you know what? It's great when my fellow fans are that passionate and care so much about these characters. It's a wonderful thing to see.
That's interesting because obviously you take it in a positive way. Another chap I interviewed this week from a different episode about video games, and he made the point to me that when you're in a controversy, it feels bad. But with time, you realise 99% of the world didn't care. The people that did care still bought the product, and it was all a big nothing.
Well, it's not a big nothing to people who really do care. Right. And I speak now not from my producer hat, but from my fanboy geek hat. it means so much to so many people. And coming up from the ranks of fandom, I was there when fandom initially just began to organize back when I was a kid. And like I said, the first Comic-Con was put on, which I'll never forget. 200 of us showed up at the first Comic-Con in a Fleabag hotel in New York City. And that was pretty amazing. But, I think it's important to listen to them. I don't like the fact that the internet has gone so negative. In recent years, there's a lot of trolling and a lot of negative stuff instead of what used to be, I thought, a lot of provocative and good discussions with different points of view. And I hope that the world will drift back more to that as time goes on and some people get a little bit older. I think that would be a wonderful, great thing for everybody. But no, I understand why they feel so passionate and concerned about things like that. And it's important to discuss it.
I'll put it this way. I think people are the same. I think people will express their opinions and protest against things. And most of the time it's done in a very respectful manner.
So after everything you've seen from then, and then when you've been more involved with the Ledger side and obviously Affleck more recently and all this shit, do you think there's any lessons that you've learned? Because you've got to the point now where you're kind of identifiable enough in like a Bat fan world where sometimes you get the heat as if you were the film producer.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think you can kill more flies with honey. And so if you do it, if you protest or make your opinion known in a respectful manner, you have more of an impact than being just flat out nasty about it. And I would think by now people would have learned their lesson when it comes to that, because any controversial casting decision that's been met with outrage, people have basically done a 180 once they've seen the performance. I mean, with Keaton, all of them. But I still think we'll still hear anytime someone's cast in the fan community, there's going to be people who are going to be butthurt, for lack of a better term, because they have this idea in their mind of who should play that role.
So that brings us to the end of our trip down Crime Alley to visit a little boy who made a vow to avenge his parents' murder and became a huge franchise, beset by psychotic clowns and pissed off fans. As Michael and Bill showed us, you can't please all the people all the time. You just have to do your best and hope you please some of the people some of the time. And what struck me most was the abject negativity some fans display, and on rare occasions their downright terrible behaviour. But I would also take away what Michael said about how controversy can demonstrate people's affection for something. After all, they wouldn't get annoyed if they didn't care. But of course, as Bill said, there is the caveat that their annoyance should be expressed in a respectful manner. So remember everyone, be on your best behaviour, because the Batman may be watching. Outrage, Outrage, Outrage featured interviews with Michael Uslan and Bill Jet Ramey. Thank you to both of those gentlemen for their time and kindness. The voice actors were Robert Taylor, Ed Feather and Ruth Tinsley, and it was written and produced by me, Andy Smith. Michael's autobiography, The Boy Who Loved Batman, is available from all good book retailers, and head on over to batmanonfilm.com, which is Bill's site, for all the Batman news you can handle, along with podcasts, videos and more. And I'll leave you now with a few closing words of inspiration from Mr. Uslan.
Well, you know what, Andy? What I've done in my life is I took what I was passionate about. I took what I loved. I was a total comic book geek. I learned to read from comic books, my mom said, before I was 4. I had 30,000 comic books dating back to 1936 before I graduated from high school. And I went to the first Comic-Con ever held on the planet Earth. This was my life. This was my soul. I loved this stuff. But to be able to take what you absolutely love in life and make it your work, there's just nothing better than that.